Hey, let's talk about what I read in September. First, we have Rain in the Underlands. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. When I first heard about this book, I thought it sounded great, and I still believe it had the opportunity to be great. This book had an interesting idea, fun characters, exciting creatures, but the execution was a bit messy, kind of like my hair. In saying that, I don't think this was a bad book, and it does have enjoyable moments. I just think it could have been a lot better, and a round of developmental editing would have done it a world of good. Next up, we have Station 11. I gave this one 5 stars. This was chosen for our book club. It was my friend's turn to pick for winter, and there were some delays, but it worked out well for me because I'd opted to stick to sci-fi for September, and this lined up with that. Folks, this book was phenomenal. Absolutely incredible. When I say I was invested from the first page, I really mean it. This was one of those books with a lot of clever little connections and things that tie together perfectly. I am a sucker for clever little connections in books. There are interlocking plots and characters and details you might typically brush over but prove to be significant later on. My only issue was with the way the characters were introduced in part 2. It was a bunch of characters in quick succession, several being referred to as something other than a name, and it was hard to keep up and remember who was who and what voice they should have. Aside from that, everything felt as though it flowed beautifully, everything was wrapped up at the end, and all of the threads tied together, and no questions were left. It was the kind of book that I was so invested in that when I finished it, there was a hole. I was thinking about this book for several days. I'd become so attached to it that I had to remind myself that it was a book. It felt so clear. There were moments I'd been confused and thought it was a show I'd been watching. That is how beautifully written this book was. Caring for Your Clown, Book 2, Trial and Error. 4 out of 5 stars. Much like Book 1, Trial and Error is the best kind of disaster. The roller coaster of emotions Oleander puts his readers through is never-ending, and he knows exactly how to do it in a way that will wreak the most havoc. It's a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of queer chaos, and a lot of trauma and destruction. In other words, if you're into aliens, clowns, or having your heart torn to pieces, patched with a band-aid, and then ripped to absolute shreds, I would recommend reading this series. The Kings of Nowhere by C.G. Drews. 5 out of 5 stars. This is the sequel to The Boy Who Steals Houses, but it follows Avery settling in with the Delaney family while Sam does his time in juvie. This book also has point of view chapters for Jeremy Delaney scattered through, filling in details and giving us a bit more insight into the always happy, ever joking Delaney son. It's beautiful, wholesome, and filled with warmth. It will also rip your heart to shreds and leave you crawling on the floor to find the pieces through your tears. And finally, we have Prey by Michael Crichton. This was 4 out of 5 stars to me. Michael Crichton's books always give me this feeling that I'm not smart enough to review them, especially when I'm trying to explain what I love about the books to someone and their response is, if you don't like it, why do you read it? Which is very confusing to me because I just spent the last few minutes telling you why I love this author's books. I simply don't know how to explain them, I guess. They're clever, they're detailed, they hint at what could happen and make you desperate to see how things play out. How will they fix it? How will they get out of the situation they've gotten themselves into? I was a bit surprised at how this one was resolved. It definitely wasn't what I was expecting, especially given the hinting throughout the book that told us what can destroy this nightmare they've created. Of course, I did still thoroughly enjoy reading this one, perhaps not quite as much as some of his others, but I can't place why. That's it.